Hi, it's Malusim Kize, and in this video, we're going to be looking at how a business owner can protect his private assets in case he has used them to sign his surety, for example, in starting up the business when he needed a cash injection, commonly called a contingent liability plan. We're going to look at how we structure those policies. So in keeping with the same example when we started with this whole business assurance series, I think just to recap, in order to see how everything fits in, when you look at Mr. King's personal assets and how the business Zimele Pty actually comes into the whole picture. So maybe just to perhaps run through that picture quickly. So we remember that Mr. King is married to Mrs. King and they have one daughter. They're married in community of property. And they own a house, and that's that lovely house over there. And on the business side, Mr. King is a shareholder, 70% shareholder, and Mr. Green, who is the other shareholder, is 30%, and the business is valued at 10 million rands. And Mr. King also happens to be the chief programmer within the company. Now we know that currently Zimele is worth 10 million rands, but initially, when the company began, Mr. King actually needed some capital in order to start the company. So he had to borrow 3 million rands in order to get things going. So he actually had to approach a bank to get funding for this 3 million rands. So then Mr. King approaches the bank, and the bank is actually willing to advance him funds or make a loan to him of the value of 3 million rands. So that's the loan that the bank gives him in order to start the business. Now the bank says, look, because this is a startup and we're not sure which direction things are going to go, what are you going to provide for us as security in case your business Zimele doesn't take off and you can't pay us the 3 million rand back? What assets do you have so that in the event that you can't pay us our 3 million back, we can at least have we can at least attach those assets and settle the debt. So then Mr. King says, look, I have a house, private property. I live there with my wife and daughter. Can I use that as security to say, if I cannot pay this loan back, then you can take the house? I think the last time we spoke, I think we said the house is valued at 5 million rands. So the bank says, well, okay, the loan is only for 3 million rands. The house more than covers it. So we'll use the house as security. So therefore, the loan is advanced on that basis. Now, while all that is fair and well for the bank, because at least they know that their loan is secured, but it opens up a bit of trouble for Mr. King's and his family, because if the company doesn't take off and they come into problems and they cannot repay the loan, that means the bank is going to have possession of that house. They're going to sell it in order to settle that 3 million rand outstanding loan, and the family is left destitute. So that's a problem. And what we're saying here is, in the event of death, we don't want at the same time the same thing happening, where in the event of the death of Mr. King, the company may collapse for various reasons, because they're just not making, it's not being profitable without him anymore, especially since he's a key individual as well. So we don't want, at the event of death, an unplanned event like that, or disability for that matter, so that we don't want that if that event takes place, that the family is left without a house, especially in the absence of a breadwinner. So a solution to that problem then would be to have the company, as one of the options, have the company Zimele take out a policy on the life of Mr. King, because he's the person that used his house as security, so that in the event at least of a death or a disability event, which is unplanned, that some funds are paid to settle that loan account that Mr. King took out with the bank. So a possible solution could be to introduce an insurance policy on the life of Mr. King, because what we want is that in the event of the death or disability of Mr. King, or severe illness or whatever else, in that event we want the policy to pay out to the company, so that the funds can be used to settle that loan. So the trigger event again in our example here is Mr. King. The owner of the policy in our example could be Zimele, because that's who the funds were advanced to. That's who the loan agreement with the bank was with. So Mr. King, although he approached the bank, but obviously he was approaching it to make the loan in the capacity as in his capacity as a representative of Zimele. The beneficiary would be Zimele. Now, when Zimele, we'll see later on, we're going to introduce a specific contract, because once Zimele receives those funds, in the event of death of Mr. King, there must be a contract that says these funds shall be used to settle the bank loan that exists, so that the bank later on then does not chase the house that was used for security, because now they're happy that they've been paid. So the beneficiary will be Zimele, but there must be a contract which we speak about just now. And then the payer of the policy would be Zimele as well. So that's the structure of the policy. Now, what Mr. King is going to say is, look, I'm happy to take on the debt of, or to use my house as security for the debt of the 3 million rands, because I truly believe in my business. I know that I've got tentative contracts and whatever the case may be. So I believe in my abilities. I'm going to do this. So he's not scared. So he's a typical entrepreneur. He's not scared to take on the risk. However, what he is worried about is, before he even gets there, or before he can pay back the debt of 3 million rands back to the bank, while he's building this company, what happens if he dies? What happens if he becomes severely ill? Or what happens if he gets disabled? That's what's sticking at the back of his mind. He's thinking, I know I'm an entrepreneur, and I know I want to take risks, and I know I believe in my capabilities, but in the event of something I cannot control, like a death, then I don't want my family to be destitute. So I need some comfort that there's a contract that says, if an unplanned event happens, all of those debts will be taken care of. So now we're going to structure a contingent liability plan. It's commonly called contingent liability plan. There could be other names, but it's basically a contract. So in the event of Mr. King's death, this will be the scenario. Now, the bank is going to say, Mr. King, or Zimele, that's who the contract of, that's who the loan agreement was with. Zimele must pay back the 3 million rands that it owes. I'm just going to assume that the full amount is still outstanding. So that full 3 million rands is owed by Zimele. Now, if Zimele has the cash, all well and good. However, if Zimele doesn't have the cash, Mr. King wants to have peace of mind that the house that he actually used as security, that now the bank doesn't try and attach that house, because now he's no longer around and he had actually used it as security. So instead of that, what we're going to have is the policy will pay out 3 million rands into Zimele, and then this contract here will dictate that Zimele must then on-pay this 3 million rands to the bank in order to settle the loan. Now, once that loan is settled, that means that the bank now no longer needs to chase the house. So while we cannot control the success of Zimele as a company in terms of different economic forces that come into play, but however, what we can mitigate is, in the event of a something that is uncontrolled, like a death event, that the assets of the private assets of Mr. King are actually taken care of, in that they are not used to satisfy debts when he was endeavoring to venture into business. So that could be a good mitigating way of securing those assets. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as we continue with the topic, we'll be discussing more in detail things such as, for example, such as the contingent liability agreement that has to be entered into, what are the different elements that come into it, and we'll discuss the taxation of these policies as well. So I hope to see you soon, and thank you.